So the recording will start in a second. Page 291. We're in the midst of the discussion of the Zohar about the scene where Isaac blesses Jacob when he apparently intended all along to bless Esau. So we're at the top of the page. Come and see. And just to say a word about what we had before, the previous few statements were about the importance of how a human being can do the right thing, and they can straighten out their heart, and that's by engaging in Torah. So that background teaching, of course, is important for the question that always looms over this story. Where's the honesty? Where's the straightness of heart when it comes to this act that Jacob, with his mother's encouragement, does in apparently fooling his father? So that's the issue again and again and again that comes up here. So the very top of 291, come and see. Who would like to read, please? Hello, quick on the draw.
If I can unmute as quick as I could put my hand up.
Not bad, not bad, not bad.
Come and see. All of Jacob's actions were for the sake of the Blessed Holy One, so he accompanied him constantly, Shekinah never departing from him. Look, when Isaac called Esau his son, Jacob was not there, but Shekinah revealed it to Rebecca, and Rebecca to Jacob.
Okay. Sandra, can you please mute yourself so that we can minimize as much as possible whatever extra noises we get here?
Sorry.
That's okay. When anybody wants to talk, you're certainly welcome to unmute. So at the bottom of the screen, if you put your pointer, your cursor, there you go. Okay. So we have this opening declaration to reassure us. All of Jacob's actions were for the sake of the Blessed Holy One. This is a little bit recalling the opening statement where we started with this discussion. Look back on page 287.
What would you like me to read?
As Rabbi Shimon said, that first paragraph of this.
Rabbi Shimon said, "It is written, God called the light day, and darkness he called night." This verse has been established and explained, but come and see. All actions of the Blessed Holy One are true entities reflecting supernal mystery. All words of Torah are words of faith, supernal mysteries, fittingly.
And now we come to 291, where we're starting this evening. And come and see, we have this sort of kind of a continuity. Again, all of Jacob's actions are for the sake of the Blessed Holy One. So all the actions line up. Whatever God does, whatever the Kutchabrichu does is all what's supposed to be, and it's the truth, and it's the right thing. And now we have on the human side, and then all of the words of the Torah, words of truth and faith. And now we have the human actions of Jacob. They're all in alignment, and they're for the sake of the Kutchabrichu, of the Blessed Holy One. And therefore, God is always with him. God is always taking care of Jacob. So Shekhinah never leaves him. So now we have a kind of a proof to show that that's the case. Where's that coming from?
My phone.
Well,
Sorry.
sounds like a very chauffeury, ring. All right. So when Isaac called Esav his son, Jacob was not there. Right. So this is now the Zohar, taking piece by piece the story and looking at how the story unfolded. And they say, take a look at how the beginning of the story happens. It says, as we started back on 287 or whatever that page was, that Jacob is getting old and his eyes are darkened and he can't see anymore, right? And he calls to Esav Beno Hagadol, right? So he calls to his elder son Esav. This is chapter 27, right? He says, my son, he says, here I am. He says, good, look, I'm getting old. I don't know when I'm going to die. Now, take all of your stuff and go out into the field and go hunt for me something. Hunt up something and then make it into something delicious for me, matamim, just like I love. Bring it for me, and then I'll be able to eat it, and I'll feel really great and be able to give you a blessing with such a feeling of good-heartedness and satisfaction. So the Zohar says, notice that nobody else seems to be in attendance. Nobody else is there, and Yaakov is certainly not there. And if Yaakov isn't there, Yaakov doesn't know that this is what's happening. So he could very easily have missed out on the opportunity to get the bracha. So what happened though? But Shechina revealed it to Rebekah, and Rebekah to Jacob. Okay, so however, Rebekah is in communication with Shechina. In a certain sense, Rivka is Shechina, and therefore Rivka, as we will see in another couple of things, she hears the whole thing, right? And we've had it before as well. She hears everything. So Rivka / Shechina knows that this is happening, and then what happens? So she then goes. The verse says, this is verse 5. Rivka shama'as b'dvar Yitzchak, b'daber Yitzchak el Esav, el Esav asadeh, Rivka amra al Yaakov. So first, Rivka hears Isaac speaking to Esav. Then Esav leaves to go into the field to go hunting, and then Rebekah tells Yaakov the whole business. So Rivka Shechina is looking out for Yaakov. So this is because Yaakov has always been totally dedicated to the Holy Blessed One, and Shechina is also totally dedicated to the Holy Blessed One, right? So therefore, she's going to help him out. Okay, Rabbi Yossi said.
Rabbi Yossi said, if heaven forbid Esav had been blessed at that moment, Jacob would never have prevailed, but it issued from the Blessed Holy One, everything falling into place fittingly.
Okay, so again, we get the idea that God is pulling the strings, and we have the idea here that, of course, it's all coming out of the Kudsha B'richu, but the Kudsha B'richu arranges it so that Shechina is on the watch and is able to intervene. I want to just pause for a second to take in what Rabbi Yossi is saying, because it's very astounding, actually. It's really it's a little bit, it can shake you up a little bit. What Rabbi Yossi says is that had this divine intervention by Shechina not taken place to save the day, then Yitzchak would have given the blessing to Esav, and that blessing would have been totally valid and in force, and Yaakov wouldn't have had ever have a hope. Right? The Jewish people would never be able to get out from under of Esav's rule, Esav's control. And of course, for the Zohar, Esav is bad, right? So let's think for a second. What this is? The Zohar is playing this very interesting, music, or it's dancing a very, very interesting dance, and we've seen it before, but here it's really, very strong. What's the connection between divine providence and coincidence? What's the relationship between the way things actually just sort of fall out and whatever plans, designs God has for the world, for history, for life? Because what we have here, of course, is, on the one hand, again and again, we've done this. On the one hand, we have human beings muddling around, muddling through. There's a family drama going on here. The couple, the husband and the wife are not on the same page. The children are not the same. There's all kinds of intrigue going on, and that's a very human thing. But for the Zohar, of course, it's not just that. It's also a divine dynamic. And Yitzchak is Pachad. Yitzchak is Din. And Rivka is Shechina. And Yaakov is Kudsha B'richo, actually. So the back and forth that's playing here is not just that the Zohar can't keep it straight. It's a way that the Zohar tries to deal with this mystery, right? And in the end, what Rabbi Yossi is saying is that from one perspective, this is a struggle within God's own dynamic. Because if Shechina doesn't jump in here to save the day, then Yaakov, Yisrael, which is another eventually manifestation of Shechina, will be lost. Because Esav, the wicked forces from outside the divine family, will take over. And with God's blessing. So that stress is a, it's here. And it's important for us to just sort of, take notice of it. I don't have something to clarify it by or to put it all neatly into a package. But this is what Rabbi Yossi is saying. There's this historical moment, which is also a moment within the life of God, which was on the brink. And if it just would have gone a certain other way, everything would have been different. And that's what was at stake here, right? Would Yaakov be able to live? Would the Jewish people be able to live? Would the Torah be able to live? Would God be able to escape control by Esav? Or would Esav get, the blessing from God anyway? So hold on a second. I got to look in the chat for a second. Where is it? Where's the, how do I see where the comments, here. Sorry. Mark asks, how does this differ from other early mythical explanations? For example, Greek mythology. Okay, so I'm going to ask all the Greek mythology experts to answer that question. How is this different? How is this any different from the kinds of stories we have of this god trying to outsmart that god, or this god being jealous of the other god, or betraying this? How does it make any difference here? I mean, is there a difference? Is this just another kind of way of taking, all the fickleness of human nature and just projecting it onto, godly beings, but it's all the same kind of stuff. So I don't know if that adequately conveys more of the question or not, but that's the question before us. Anybody have something to offer on this? Okay, Craig has nothing to offer on this. I see that the eyebrows going up and the head shaking back and forth. Right, and you're supposed to also go with your shoulders. You're supposed to go like this, right, just like that. So then it's a full answer. So all right. So if you think that I have an answer for this that's going to be satisfying, then you haven't been studying Zohar with me for very long. The answer to me is the same answer that I've given in one form or another, when we encounter this question, and that is that there is an element in this struggle that is not, I don't think, in the ultimate agenda of the Greek, myths in the puny way that I have, looked at them. And that's the moral dimension. In the Greek stories, it's equally possible for evil to win out or for virtue, and virtue itself is not necessarily a moral category. It's just an impressive category, because the virtues can be, we're going to have, Esav is a really great hunter. In Greek mythology, that's pretty impressive. In Jewish mythology, it's terrifying. So there is a kind of a moral underpinning, and the acknowledgement that there is this seeming randomness or arbitrariness to it is accompanied by a horror of that idea and a constant struggle to reassert that it's all actually for the goodness. Hold on a second, I'm going to read you in a second. And that's why we have these reassertions as I started out the evening, to go back to that original statement by the Zohar, right? That everything that God is doing is all what's supposed to be true and established. The words of the Torah are part of a mystery of faith, and the mystery is a mystery that in the end we have to be convinced that this is all part of a good vision. And Yaakov is devoted to that goodness. So let me see now what you wrote. The reason I bring this up is my concern with the idea that the Torah study is central to meaningful life in light of the behavior and of the most commitment, I think that's committed, Torah-engaged Jews. So here you're bringing up one of the saddest problems that depresses me forever. I've written about it. I've spoken about it. I am sick to my stomach with the way that so many people in the most quote-unquote Torah-dedicated part of our community behave today. And I've said it many, many times. And this is part of my own editorializing over the years. I got a little bit in trouble with some people when I wrote an article about Ovadia Yosef when he died. That how can I teach Torah when the greatest Torah scholar of our generation was a miserable human being, a terrible person, a hateful person? How do I defend the Torah when the people who are most saturated with Torah are disgusting? And when a community that is saturated with Torah commitment acts in such an immoral, disgusting, selfish, and stupid way, where's the wisdom? Where's the goodness? So I am, look, this is my life. And I draw sustenance from the same books that community lives from. And I'm not, and yet I walked away from that community. I'm convinced that community is overtaken by Esav. I am convinced that community is morally corrupt, is theologically corrupt, is religiously corrupt. It has been, it's the choices that it has made and the development that it has undergone is perverse. I think that something else is possible. And I keep trying to say that. And I feel that if I don't keep saying that, then I will be betraying everything I believe. But I think that we're in a really tough time. I think that we're in a very, very tough time as a Jewish people. I think that our connection to the Torah is very, very troubled. And there are wonderful people all over the world who are doing amazing work, and their efforts are heroic and beautiful to try to create a different way to be a faithful Jew. We just had RBG, Zichrona Livracha, passed away. Extraordinary person, extraordinary human being on so many levels. And one of the things that came out was how she walked away from her Judaism. She was actually very active in her Jewish community. And she walked away from her Judaism when she was a teenager, when her mother was sitting Shiva. I'm trying to get the story straight, accurate. I could be wrong here. And she saw that here's her mother sitting Shiva, and none of the women are included in trying to, make the minyan and in trying to be part of the religious expression of support. So she said, if this religion has no room for women, then I'm out of here. And she left. So I don't want to leave. So what can I, do me something? I don't want to leave. I want to make something else. And I want to help other people make something else. And I think it's possible. And that's what part of why we study Zohar every Thursday night, is because I'm not going to throw this book out, and I'm not going to throw this discipline out. And that's our challenge. And everybody here will process it in whatever the way they want. And, I spoke on Rosh Hashanah about holiness. And some people really, really, really felt bad that I was speaking about things that they couldn't relate to, and they felt it as a rejection. They felt it as a put down. I don't know how each person will process this challenge that we live in, but I can't forbear from saying that this is how I see some of the dimensions of the problem. So I put it out there, and then I hope that people will be Israel. I hope that they'll wrestle with it. I hope that they'll struggle with where can I make a turn here, so that all of us get out of this really blazing, devastated forest. So, if I'm not doing it right, I'm very, very, very sorry, because I really wish I could. But that's what I believe. I believe that the Torah is being betrayed, and it's very hard to get through the fog of what the Torah will be when it's repossessed and rebuilt by people who get it. And I have no idea yet what that's going to be. And I have no idea whether I'm part of it. I want to be in their number, but That's what I believe. I believe that the people that are representing, that are living the Torah as we see it today, are living a bastardized, perverted, corrupted Torah. So I don't know if that answers your question. So I see fingers typing. So, but it's not up there yet. All right, you can actually talk if you want. So, yeah, Larry.
Well, I think also bringing it in a different way to Mark's question, I feel that in Kabbalah, God is perfect and all-encompassing. In Greek mythology, the gods are neither perfect nor all-inclusive. And Greek mythology winds up with a notion of the world as kind of tragic. The tragedy of a kind of human comedy or human tragedy, whereas in the Kabbalah, at least the way it seems to me, I'm not that versed in it, but it seems that the vision, the faith vision, is that it does work, and it has to work, and that it all works. That seems to me, and maybe that's another way of saying that it has to do with the difference in the moral dimension.
So I think that you're right in one way, and that's when the Zohar keeps on talking about the fact that no, God is good and everything is true and everything is right. The problem, the problem, and also for me, the accomplishment of the Zohar is that it keeps on bringing up the imperfections, so to speak, of God. It always tries to get past it, but it doesn't simply piously give out fake news about God. It doesn't just keep on asserting that all is well with the world and everything is perfect and God is perfect. It keeps on bringing out exactly this story that we just touched on. Is completely being transparent, and it's showing God struggling with God's own self. That's not possible in the kind of simple idea of God being perfect. When you have a regular philosophical idea of God's perfection, there is no struggle within God. It's not possible. That's the mythological pagan aspect that lives on in the Zohar, and that the Zohar constantly feels it can overcome, but it keeps on letting it live. It keeps on letting it be vital in its struggle. So that's, to me, one of its greatnesses, that it's not that kind of like Sunday school piety. The perfection is a very serious and hard-won perfection.
Rabbi.
Yeah, David.
Perhaps these, I don't know what to call them, Brooklyn Orthodox, I don't know what to call them.
Brooklyn, look everywhere. Look in Israel. Look everywhere there are.
Well, these are the ones we're seeing in the news tonight.
I didn't see news tonight. There's news tonight? More problems?
Well, news tonight is what happened yesterday. But perhaps they just missed the point. I mean, we have the Torah in front of us, and they're focusing on certain things, and maybe their error or sin is the error of Adam and Eve, who focused on an apple to the exclusion of the tree, or the tree to the exclusion of the forest, and that it was a sin, and so they were expelled. Their focus is narrow.
So I think that their focus is narrow. I think that it's just a very charitable way of describing their mistake, and their mistake doesn't just have innocuous consequences. Their mistake kills people. Their mistake encourages racism and antisocial behavior and stupidity. So it's not just one little mistake. It's a systemic problem, and the deeper question, and I think this is part of what the Mark is driving at also, is so what good is the Torah doing these people? If they're so immersed in the Torah, why the heck doesn't the Torah smarten them up a little bit? Why doesn't the Torah's moral dimension seep into them a little bit? That's part of the problem.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
I've been immersed in Sukkot during Shomrei.
beautiful.
And no, that's what I do, you know. And so I've been reading Hasidic stories. And there's a famous Hasidic story about a guy who is sick. And his wife tells him not to sleep in the sukkah. And then he sleeps in the sukkah and he gets pneumonia. And his wife says to him, "Look, I told you not to sleep in the sukkah." And then he said, "Can you imagine how sick I would have gotten if I didn't do my duty?" So that, you know, that, and in light of, you know, the recent stuff with, you know, the hot spots in the Hasidic community, you know, and their unwillingness to forego, you know, the normal Sukkot celebrations in the name of obvious health risks. You know, I mean, what's the difference between that and Trump? I should spit 3 times when I say his name. You know, holding, you know, what's so important to him, the rituals of his power. And that's why I associated it with Greek mythology, because Greek mythology gives a template that anybody can use for any purpose. And I grant that there are differences between Greek mythology and say the Zohar's mythological exposition of God, or maybe mystical religion of God. But it leaves open that same possibility, that it's the kind of story that can be used for all sorts of purposes. And I appreciate your answer. I really do. And, you know, I mean, I'm spending all of these days reading stuff about Sukkot, because, you know, that's the only way that I personally can celebrate a holiday. I just have to do it intellectually. That's my, you know, or through literature. And the more I look at it, the more difficult it gets for me to make sense of it. In fact, in general, the more I know, the harder it is for me to make sense of things. So I really appreciate your attempt to struggle, and now I'll stop.
So you know, the tradition is to read Koheles on you know, sometime during Sukkot.
I did that too.
All right, so that's why you're so depressed and upset about things. You let the Koheles get to you too much. But that's part of the tradition also, right? That here it is, Man Simchatenu, and we read the most depressing, cynical book that you can possibly, you know, put together. Nothing is, don't give me that, and, you know, get off my back, and this is stupid, and everything is meaningless. It's pretty amazing. You know, and it's I guess, you know, it's a good joke. So there was Man Simchatenu comes out, you know, that we even take that stuff, the nihilism, and we make it into a joke. But I would seriously come back to you and ask you, do you know, you're saying these stories are conducive or are open to that kind of misuse or use that's for this, you know, that ends up, you know, leading to terrible things. Do you know any story that is not open to that? I don't.
Science created the atom bomb. I mean, I agree with you completely.
Right. So I think that's the thing. So but on the other hand, we can't, I believe, and that we have a gift here. And, you know, David mentioned before, look, we started out with a gift. We started out, according to this story, we started out with a gift. And that's one of, again, to me, a big difference between the Greek stories and our story is our story rubs our nose in our misuse of the story. Our story constantly tells us what miserable failures we are in taking these God-given gifts and instead we turn them into horror. And that's what we're gonna have after Sukkot is over, God willing. We'll have Shabbos Breishis, and Shabbos Breishis is this amazing, wonderful beginning. And then by after like a chapter and a half, it's all over. Like the most glorious start, and then Adam and Eve is nothing. When you get to Cain and Abel, and then get to everything else, and get to the and then by the time we're finished with the story, we're ready to to get to wipe out everything, and God says, "What a mistake." You don't have that in the other mythologies. That kind of struggle with that there is this possibility of let there be light. It's really possible, and we keep on making the darkness. And then not giving up. I think that's really amazing. I think that's the amazing thing.
Rabbi?
Yeah, where are you, Rich?
Yeah.
A voice from heaven.
So maybe this is a very minor point in the scheme of things, but as you were talking about, our muddling along, the Jewish people's stories muddling along up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, what differentiates our story with the Greeks is it's our muddle. We are responsible. In the Greek stories, the gods made me do it. And however, at this point, if it's Shekhinah who's doing the action, it takes us off the hook. It's not our problem. Whatever.
Well, so
it's dragging us down to the Greek level to a small extent.
So that's okay. So I can see Mark nodding his head. I think there's a big difference here. There's both things that you're saying are really important. So yes, I totally agree that it's on us, right? That's in the end, that's we mess up. It's nobody else's fault but us. We have to pick ourselves up. We have to do tshuva. We have to go and try again. What the Zohar here is doing that sounds so Greek is saying that sometimes even the best efforts that we can put forward will get screwed up because of historical circumstance. And we need God's help even when we want to try hard. And God will help. And that's the paradox here. Here it is, God is ready to give the bracha to Esav, but a different part of God, thank God we've got that little dualism there working for a second, just to get us out. It's like a Deus ex machina, just for a second, right? Get the good God in there to save the day, but it's for us to be able to then do what we need to do. So it's still sustaining. It's not taking us off the hook at all. It's allowing us to still be on the hook, because otherwise it would be hopeless. That's what I think is really happening in this little moment here in the that's little Rabbi Yossi's little statement. I think there's a tremendous amount that's at play here. You should know most of the traditional commentators have nothing to say about this. So it's like, okay, let's go on to the other stuff.
So, Rabbi?
Yeah.
The other non-Greek thought that came to my mind from this was the perils of time travel, about being, going back and trying to correct and undo. Right. Very good. The unintended consequences. Right.
So yes, so here, thank God, it doesn't have to be backwards. It's on the spot. Just in time. Rivka Shechina comes to the rescue.
Yet there's still fear of unintended consequences, whether backwards or forwards.
Well, there are always unintended consequences, just in not just backwards, forwards. I'm saying in present time, in all of life, anything that you're doing, there's going to be an unintended consequence every single second. And again, like you say, but nevertheless, we have to take a little responsibility and try the best we can. I wanna bring out one more kind of like really important moment that has this quality that I brought up before, as always, but that we should take note of. And that is when we begin the Haggadah. When we begin the Haggadah, we ask the 4 questions, and then we say, Avadim hayinu lefar b'Mitzrayim. V'yotzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham biyad chazako v'zro netuya. So why are we doing all of this? Because we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and then God took us out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, right? And what do we say immediately after that? V'ilu lo hotzi hakadosh baruch hu es avosenu miMitzrayim, harei anu uvaneinu uvnei vaneinu mishubadim hayinu lefar b'Mitzrayim. Had God not taken us out of Egypt at that moment, we and our children and children's children would still be slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Not just that those people would still have been slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. The moment would have been lost. It was a pregnant moment, and either it was going to have the consequences we wanted, to use your term, Rich, or the consequences would have been disastrous. There's the Haggadah, tells us how grateful we have to be, because it was not in our hands at all. It was not in our hands, as much as we would have wanted to be free, and some of us didn't even want to be free anymore. But anybody that still wanted to be free, we couldn't have done anything about it, except for the miracle of God taking us out of Egypt. And had God not done it at that moment, the human material of the Jewish people would have been completely depleted of any worthiness or of any possibility of ever becoming free again. It's a scary, scary notion. I mean, that's, to me, one of the most significant moments of the Pesach Seder, right there at the start. It's about then why we have the Seder, because how awesome is this? And how scary it is. But this is in some way the same kind of claim that everything hinged on this moment, and it wasn't. There are things we cannot take care of, we cannot control, we cannot completely overturn everything that's happening in the world in one moment. And this is where God had to jump in. And just to say again the obvious, that then keeps on reinstating then our responsibility to keep going after that. It's like when the parent gives the kid a little shove on the bicycle. If it's not for that shove, the kid will not pedal, the kid will fall down, will be traumatized, never get on a bike ever again in their life. But with all of the tsittering and all of the trembling and so on, the parent gives that shove, and then the miracle happens. Okay.
Rabbi,
yes.
I'd like to say a couple of things. So,
sure.
As somebody who's wandered through some of these different traditions, first of all, in terms of Greek mythology, it's always the way I always read the stories. They were stories. The gods were so much like the humans that, yeah, they had power, but they were they were not awesome in that notion of awe and trembling as we see God. That's number one. So I always saw those as really stories, and in some way our stories were of real human beings with incredible dimensions, and this God that we have had incredible multiplicity and dimension, and so there was this amazing difference, and then sometimes they come together. So I could never understand our stories when the rabbis that I studied with would say, you have to think of them sometimes as our mythology. And I couldn't get there because mythology to me was so limited. That's one thing. The other thing is that when you talked about these Torah driven. I'm not sure. People who live Torah in some way. Now, my worldview is very limited. I've had limited experience. But every time I encounter people who are from some of these very religious communities, now a lot of times I've encountered them in my work. There's such credence to what the rabbi says, rather than the way I see Judaism in perhaps the kind of conservative or other pieces where there's incredible discourse and discussion and respect. And yes, the scholars may have more of a say, but I always see Judaism as something where you're taught to think for yourself within a structure. And somehow a lot of these folks, when I hear them talk, I think, where are those levels of Torah that we talk about, the pshat and then all the hidden layers? It doesn't seem like they ever do that. They get an idea and they hold on to it in this very limited way. Where is that sort of ability to think and sort out within this amazing context? So that's just my 2 cents.
Well, so about the first point that you made, I think just real quick, and then we're going to go back into the Zohar. We have to be very careful. I think it's actually a matter of a lot of scholarly discussion. What was it like to be a Greek
right
believer?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're saying no, they were just people or they're stories for you, but we have this awesome dimension. I think that awe is universal, capacity for awe. And I wouldn't presume to say whether the gods for a Greek person corresponding to us wouldn't feel awe and even passionate love for the gods or a particular god. So I don't know. I don't know that distinction is fruitful. With regard to the second one, I'll tell you a story since we like stories. So when I was in yeshiva, I had a very good friend who was a really special human being, and he was becoming more and more and more pious. We were roommates for a year. And by the end of the year, and he wanted to be a roommate with me because he wanted to, have a good chaver. By the end of the year, he decided he couldn't be roommates with me anymore because I was a bad influence. But while we were close, we were studying with the same teacher, the same rabbi. And he started saying, you have to ask the rabbi everything. You really have to ask, in order to know how to live, you have to ask the rabbi every single thing that you should do, and even tying your shoes. So I said, I don't believe that. I think that that's not right. So I said, go ask your rabbi whether that's right. So he went to ask the rabbi, and the rabbi said, no, Greenstein is right. So thankfully, the rabbi therefore set his mind at ease that he doesn't have to ask the rabbi. So it goes around in a circle like that. What does it mean to be dedicated to absolutes or to be dedicated to certain teachers? It can work in many different ways. My friend became a very pious rabbi, and God bless him. Okay, come and see. Beryl, back to you. Beryl, you're frozen. No, you're not frozen.
Sorry. Come and see what is written. Rebecca loved Jacob, which has already been discussed. So she sent for Jacob and said to him, look, I have heard your father speaking to Esau, your brother. Now, my son, listen to my voice. It was then the eve of Passover, when the evil impulse must be exterminated and the moon prevail. Mystery of faith. So she prepared 2 dishes.
Okay, so let's see now what's going on. And here the Zohar goes, full force into, the whole arsenal of using all of Jewish practice and tradition and symbolism. So Rivka loves Yaakov, and that's Shechina, loves Kutchabrichu, loves Jacob in this human and very vulnerable moment where he could be lost forever in this world. And of course, that's her concern. That's Shechina's concern, after all, right? The presence of God in this world, in this material human existence. So she calls for him to save the day. Jacob knows nothing about what's going on. And she says, she tells him the whole story, and she hears. That's the first part, right? It says Rivka Shoma'at. That's verse 5. And then it says verse 8, V'ata b'ni shma b'koli asher ani mitzava otach. And now, my son, now you listen to me. You do some listening after I heard what I heard. Okay, so the Zohar now sets the stage and says, this is Erev Pesach. And what's the job that we're supposed to perform on Erev Pesach? What are we supposed to do?
Burn the leaven. Burn the chametz.
Burn the chametz. And chametz is the sitra achra. Right? Chametz, the leavening, is the yetzer hara, the evil inclination, evil itself. So this is our job on Erev Pesach. Right? So, and of course, Esav here is the evil inclination also, right? So when the evil impulse must be exterminated, and the moon, which is Rivka, which is Shechina, must prevail, because that's going to be, by that night, it will be the full moon, right? Mystery of faith. So this is Raza de Behemnuta, right? This is the idea here of trying to reassert. That's where, again, the perfection of God is always this tenuous balancing act that has to be reasserted. To reassert the mystery of faith is the oneness, right? The oneness of God that doesn't seem to ever to be one. It always seems to be fragmented. So she prepared 2 dishes. So that's, of course, went back to the story where it says, she says to him, this is verse 9, now please go to the sheep and bring me back shnei gdaye izim tovim. Right? So bring me back 2 really good, little goats. So 2 of them. So the Zohar says, what's with the 2? Why 2? So frail Nebuchadnezzar Isaac is going to eat 2 whole goats. So the answer that the Zohar is indicating is, this is the 2 Pesach sacrifices. On Erev Pesach is Sandra, you know what? Whoever is not muted, please mute. Please mute. So on Erev Pesach, we have 2 sacrifices that have to be prepared. One is the Paschal lamb, the famous Passover sacrifice, the Korban Pesach, and the other is a Korban Chagiga. Korban Chagiga is the regular generic holiday sacrifice. So that holiday sacrifice, the Chagiga, is common to all the holidays, to Sukkot and to Pesach and to Shavuos, but and that's basically how you ate your holiday meals. The Chagiga was a shlamim. It was a sacrifice that was mostly eaten by everybody, with a tiny bit given to the Kohanim, and a tiny and the innards, the guts, burnt up on the altar. So there were 2 sacrifices that were prepared on Erev Pesach, and so too over here she's reenacting this whole ritual for the sake of extirpating evil, of making sure that evil will not triumph. And look at that, voila, that same turning point that I mentioned before about Pesach itself is here sort of brought in a certain kind of way, because this is what it's going to take to get the blessing from Yitzchak, who is the necessary channel for this blessing. Can't come from anybody else, but it has to go to Jacob. So okay, I wanna mention one kind of additional teaching that one of the commentators brings up, and it is, they suggest that in a certain sense, David brought it up earlier, the question of the first sin, right? The first sin with Adam and Eve, and they created the problem of losing their focus, or of narrowing their focus, and so on, which we had in the Zohar, in all through Bereshis. So this commentary suggests that we have here a tikkun, repair for that moment. And Rivka, we're going to get to it in a couple of minutes. Jacob is a surrogate for Adam, and Rivka is a surrogate for Eve. And the problem of Eve feeding Adam improperly, and of Adam listening to Eve's persuasion to do that, that's the first story. And now what we have is a story where Rivka / Eve says, listen to me this time again. The last time you listened to me, you got into trouble. And the last time I gave you, when we talked about a meal of, sharing some food, it was really bad. But this time, listen to me so that we can get this straight again, right? So that we can, to use Rich's, image from before, it's a little bit of a time travel, right? It's a little bit of going back to that first, stumbling, and see if we can this time straighten things out. An interesting parallel. Okay, let's continue. Rabbi Yehuda.
Rabbi Yehuda said, an intimation here that Jacob's descendants would one day offer 2 goats on Yom Kippur, one for Yud He Vav He and one for Azazel. Therefore, she offered 2 goats, one for a supernal wrong and one to subdue the wrong of Esav, so he would not dominate Jacob. So, 2 goat kids, both of which Isaac tasted and ate.
Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda says the special moment in the Jewish calendar that we should be connecting this up with is not Pesach, Erev Pesach, where the 2 sacrifices are 2 bona fide, holy sacrifices that celebrate our exodus from Egypt, our liberation of God's great might, God's caring. No, the two goats correspond to another double sacrifice that we have, but where the double sacrifice is much more complicated. It's the double sacrifice of the 2 goats on Yom Kippur, right? And we just finished with that, where one goat is actually treated as a legitimate sacrifice, and the other is the scapegoat. They're identical. And we've talked about this many times before. And how do we know which one is supposed to be the legitimate sacrifice and which one is supposed to be the scapegoat?
By lottery.
By
That's a
lottery,
lot.
right? By chance. It's totally arbitrary, totally random. But one of these sacrifices will be totally sacred and holy and dedicated to God. And the other one will be laden with all of the schmutz, the spiritual or moral schmutz of the Jewish people. And it will be, expelled from civilization and sent off to die in the wilderness. And the idea being, because the wilderness is, for the Zohar, the habitation of evil, right? Chaos, death, privation. So, and that's why do we send it out there? To distract the evil, so that they don't come. The evil forces or the evil accuser will be distracted or bought off by that payment, and therefore will be distracted and not tell God the truth in testimony against us and get us in trouble. Right. So we have the for Rabbi Yehuda, we got to get the evil off the stage. Right. We have to get the evil out of the presence of the drama that needs to unfold between God and the good guys, however flawed the good guys are. So here we have Esav and Isaac are there and Yaakov is not. And then Rebecca has to scramble to switch things around. So thankfully, Esav goes off to hunt. So he takes himself out of the picture. And now she has to inject Yaakov to be in Isaac's space so that they two can be together while Esav is distracted, right? And the two goats are emblematic of that. And then the Zohar says, and guess what? Isaac ate from both of them. What does that mean? And there's a helpful footnote here for that. Not.
He ate some of Esau.
Oh, not. He didn't. It does. Yes, so he ate some of that. So these are, one is the supernal wrong, for the supernal wrong to subdue the wrong of Esav. So we see it in Yom Kippur as a kind of a trick, right? And actually that word, of course, is very, important for us here. But we trick the Satan or the Yetzer Hara, the Sitra Achra, we deflect the Sitra Achra with that goat, right? Here, and as a result, we get the blessing from God, forgiveness and blessing for another year and life. And then the rest of our responsibility will be to defeat evil, to do mitzvot, to make the world better. So we've been able to outsmart evil. The point being not just to trick evil, but to subdue evil. So one way to look at this in a nice way is that Yitzchak, of course, is here the source of blessing. And Yitzchak's eating of both of those goats is what sanctifies each goat for its own purpose. Right? So one goat will be for Yaakov and to raise Yaakov up, and one goat will be to bring Esav down, right? To let the forces of blessing prevail. That would be one positive way to look at it. The darker way to look at it is that Yitzchak still eats from that goat, just like we want the Sitra Achra to eat from the goat. Right? When we feed that scapegoat to the wilderness, it's for the Sitra Achra, for Satan, to eat the goat. So we have here a very creepy, again, chilling, possible way of reading this text, that in the end, that's still part of Yitzchak, right? it's still in some way connected to that din, that pachad, that terror, which is part of God, right? That frightening aspect of judgment, of violence, of rage, all of that. So, yeah, Yitzchak eats from that goat also. Okay, we got 2 minutes. Another 2 lines. We're on 292.
He brought him wine and he drank. He brought him wine, intimating an intimation. From a distant realm, he brought it near, from the realm of Esav.
Right, so if you look at the text in the Torah, it says that Rivka gives instructions to Yaakov, right? And he says, listen to me. Go now to the sheep, bring me the 2 goats, and I'll make them into some tasty dish that your father loves, right? You'll bring it to your father, and he'll eat so that he'll be able to bless you before he dies. Then Yaakov has a whole, panic attack, and he goes, this is not going to work out so well, and what happens? What if I get cursed? We'll come back to that later. But then, when we get to when he goes into Yitzchak's room, he says, okay, here. He says, Kum nashva ve'ochla mitzedi. Come and eat from what I hunted, from what I caught, right? So we have another part of the story, the famous story, when he has to come close and he touches him and so on. And then he says, verse 24, Vayomer ataze b'ni Esav, Vayomer ani, are you really Esav, my son? And he goes, yes, I am, right? Or it is I, which is, we'll get to it later, a little ambiguous. And then he says, Vayomer hagisha li v'yochla mitzed b'ni, l'man tevorecha nafshi. Okay, he says, okay, so serve me, and I'll eat from my son's, catch, so that my soul will bless you. Vayagesh lo vayochal, so he served him, and then it says vayave lo yayin vayesht, and he brought him wine, and he drank. So what do you mean he brought him wine? You mean he didn't set up a whole meal? There was nothing to drink first, but then he had to bring him the wine. So that's number 1. Number 2, if you look at the trup markings for that vayavelo, it's a little funny. It's a little unusual. So the lo has a double mercha. It's a mercha is a certain type of simple trup marking. It goes darga, and then mercha kfula. Or it's got other names in other traditions as well. So that's why we have here, and I think this is Rabbi Yehuda saying it, although it doesn't quite say, but intimation of an intimation. Ramaz Ramiza, right? That's the double mercha, right? It's a hint of a hint that vayavelo, he brought for him. He had to go someplace else to bring, or there's something significant about this bringing. This bringing is laden with some meaning. And the answer is, what's the meaning? He brought it from a distant realm, and he had to bring it close. It wasn't around, it had to be brought nearer. We're going to look at the various ways of understanding that next time. I don't want to give away the secret. You can look at the notes, but something to look forward to. Also very interesting interpretations. Next week, I look forward to taking a few days off. So we're going to go away for a while and take a little break after this whirlwind season. And so next week we're not meeting, and hopefully we'll be able to regather the week after, right, which is the 22nd, I think. So next week we're not going to be meeting. I want to wish everyone Chag Sameach, all good things. All right.
Yeah.
This won't be your weekend house in Montclair?
No, not in Montclair. It'll be someplace else.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.